Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 27 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto. And we are in the 9th chapter of the third canto, and the 9th chapter is Brahma's prayers for creative energy, and we are in the last section, which is Garbhodakshay Vishnu responds to Brahma, or to the prayers of Brahma. Yes, Brahma's prayers were from verse 1 to 25, then he became silent. We read yesterday from 26 to 28. So then, from 29 to the end of the chapter, verse 44, it's Garbhodakshay Vishnu responds to Brahma, and today we are starting with verse 36. But first of all, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapaturubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha. Paditanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Right, so it's now Garbhodakshay Vishnu responding to the prayers of Lord Brahma. So verse 36, Garbhodakshay Vishnu says, although I am not easily knowable by the conditioned soul, you have known me today because you know that my personality is not constituted of anything material, and specifically not of the 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. All right, so purport. Srila Prabhupada says that knowledge of the absolute truth does not necessitate negation of the material world. That's what the impersonalists think, that whatever is in the material world is not in the absolute truth. So, for example, in the material world there are persons, so in the absolute truth there's no personality. In the material world there is music. In the absolute truth there's no music. It's all negation, nati, not this, not this, not this. So, yeah, it doesn't necessitate negation of the material world to understand the absolute truth, but it just requires understanding of the spiritual nature, spiritual existence as it is. So, well, as we just mentioned actually, to think that because material existence is there with forms and various other things, so spiritual existence must be formless. It's just a negation, that's all. It's not like a positive understanding of what is spirit. So Srila Prabhupada says that the real spiritual conception is that spiritual form is not material form. It has a different nature, spiritual form, but it's still form. So Lord Brahma is appreciating the form of the Lord like that, in that way. And the Lord Garbhodakshaya Vishnu approved of his concept, his conception of form, of the Lord's form particularly. Of course, we know in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna condemned the material concept of his body, which is there because he's presenting himself like a man, like a human. Of course, his eternal form is like that anyway, with 2 arms and so on and so forth. But anyway, the point here is that the Lord may appear in any of his many forms, but those forms are never made of matter. Never made of matter. Prabhupada says, not materially composed. Plus, in terms of the Lord and his body and who he is and what he is, Prabhupada says, there's no difference between the Lord's body and the Lord himself. He and his body are one. We and our bodies are two. Yes, distinct from each other. Our material bodies and us as eternal spiritual persons, they're two different identities altogether. But the Lord and his body, they're one. So this is the way, this is how to conceive of the spiritual form of the Lord. So, okay, on to verse 37. Garbhodakshaya Vishnu says, when you were contemplating whether there was a source to the stem of the lotus of your birth, and you even entered into that stem, you could not trace out anything. But at that time, I manifested my form from within, means from within Brahma. Yes. So, yes, there's interesting purport here. First point, and it's really an important point, the Lord can only be experienced by his causeless mercy, not by mental speculation, and not just with the help of the senses. We will experience the Lord just by applying our eyes. Yes, and then we'll see him. But actually, he can only be experienced by his causeless mercy. Therefore, it's said, Prabhupada said, that Krishna is always self-manifested. You cannot force him to manifest. Even in what one might think of as a very obvious situation, that you look at something and you see it. Your senses just apply themselves to an object and you see it, or you touch it, or you smell it, or whatever like that. So, a very good example of this, how the Lord is not just perceived with the senses just in some obvious way, but that there's real subtlety to it, is when Krishna and Balaram entered the wrestling arena in Mathura, and which led to Krishna killing Kamsa. But first of all, the two of them entered the arena, and then different people saw them in different ways, with the help of their senses. They just looked, but they saw Krishna and Balaram in different ways. The household ladies, mothers, saw Krishna and Balaram as these helpless little boys who are meant to fight these big wrestlers, and they thought, this is just terribly unfair. But the wrestlers saw Krishna and Balaram as death personified. Yeah. And the girls, like teenage girls like that, they saw Krishna and Balaram as the most beautiful and most attractive young men. And then, interesting point, there were some impersonalists there who feel that God is light. And when they looked out, when they saw Krishna and Balaram, they just saw two lights moving across the arena. And there were some, not actually Buddhists as such, because Buddha had not appeared yet, of course, but there were some people who followed the same philosophy as Buddhism, same philosophy, voidists, who feel that nothing exists, not even Brahman, which the impersonalists think. So they think nothing exists. So when Krishna and Balaram entered the arena and walked across the arena, those people saw nothing. So anyway, Prabhupada makes the point, the material senses cannot approach Krishna. They cannot approach the transcendental understanding of the Lord. Only submissive devotional service can do that. Lead us to appreciate the Lord correctly. Because when we do devotional service, Krishna reveals himself to the devotee. So in this way he can be experienced by his causeless mercy. And really, he can only be known through love. Yes. The spiritual eyes must be opened with the ointment of love. And as long as the spiritual eyes are closed due to the dirtiness of matter being on them, then you can't see the Lord. But when that dirt on the eyes is removed by the process of devotional service, then you can see him without doubt. So as Garbhodakshay Vishnu said in the verse itself, when Brahma made his effort to find the root of the lotus, that it failed. His personal effort to find the root of the lotus failed. But when the Lord was satisfied with his devotional services, penance, and devotional service, then the Lord revealed himself from within Brahma with no external effort on the part of Brahma. Yes. So it's really very wonderful. And verse 38, O Brahma, the prayers that you have chanted, praising the glories of my transcendental activities, the penances you have undertaken to understand me, and your firm faith in me, all these are to be considered my causeless mercy. Wow, that's... Okay, let's go through the purport, see what Prabhupada says. So, first point is when we serve the Lord in transcendental love, or even, love is very high. Of course, one could say, it can be said that we have some love for the Lord because he's given his mercy. We're engaged in devotional service. It's just a fact. And we're regularly chanting Hare Krishna every day and so on like that. So that there is something of transcendental love in us and in our service to the Lord. But, of course, it's not very much compared to the love of the great devotees, particularly the Brijbasi devotees in the spiritual world. So, but anyway, Prabhupada makes the point that when we serve the Lord nicely, in transcendental loving service, but at least nicely, with some sincerity, then the Lord helps as the Chaita Guru. He may help in many ways from within the heart. And when the Lord does that, then the devotee finds that he or she can do so many things, even things which, like very unexpected things. Prabhupada says, certain things, many wonderful activities beyond material estimation. You know, we've had experience, we get experience of this in many ways, actually. But the most vivid, I think the most vivid experience, at least one of very vivid experiences I've had, and I know many devotees have had, is when we do book distribution. And, you know, when we go out, we may not feel so optimistic that I may distribute lots of books. But when you really get into it, in a mood of service to the spiritual master, and selfless service, and really doing our best in that mood, then, by Krishna's mercy, so we become empowered. Some Shakti manifests, not through our, pulling some Shakti out of ourselves, but just by the mercy of the Lord from within. And suddenly the devotee finds he or she is distributing many, many books, and even sometimes so many that you wonder, how on earth is this happening? Well, it's happening by the Lord's mercy, because we are serving nicely in some sort of mood of service, dedication to the spiritual master like that. So Prabhupada gives an example here. By the mercy of the Lord, even a layman can compose prayers of the highest spiritual perfection. A layman means someone who's not an advanced devotee, for sure. Generally, layman means just a common person, and not one of the priests or the in crowd. But by the Lord's mercy, even a layman can compose prayers of the highest spiritual perfection, Srila Prabhupada says. And to continue the point, Prabhupada says that spiritual perfection is not limited by material qualification, like literacy. We know what is said in a couple of places, a few places maybe, in Chaitanya Charitamrita. By the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, a lame man can climb mountains, a blind man can see the stars in the sky, and an uneducated child can understand the truths of the Vedic scriptures. And there are different examples given in different places along those lines. By the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, things that you would feel, not just that they'd be difficult, but they'd just be impossible, completely impossible. But So the lack of material qualification, for example, a lame person, means they can't walk. They just cannot walk at all. So the material qualification for climbing mountains is just not there at all. But by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, that can happen. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point that the qualification is developed by the sincere efforts of the devotee in devotional service, means that when the devotee makes such sincere efforts in devotional service, the Lord gives his mercy. And then by the mercy of the Lord, these otherwise completely impossible things, they become easy. Like a child, an uneducated child, a preschool child can understand the truths of the Vedic literatures. My gosh. It's really extraordinary. The causeless mercy of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, voluntary endeavor is the only qualification for spiritual perfection. Material acquisitions of wealth or education are not considered. Just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that in the song, what is it? The Song of the Merchant. Anyway, I forget the actual name, but he sings, if you get Jatidan Vidyabala Nakare Apeksha, Jatidan Vidyabala, Lord Nityananda, when he considers, should he give you his mercy or not, then Jati, your birth, Dan, your wealth, Vidya, your knowledge, material knowledge, Nakare Apeksha. He doesn't even see those things. He doesn't even see those things. He just sees, if when you chant the name of Lord Gora, that maybe a tear comes from your eye. And then that's all he needs. Then he accepts you. And he doesn't even notice your Jatidan Vidyabala, your birth, your wealth, your education, or your strength. Not considered. Okay. Verse 39. I am very much pleased by your description of me in terms of my transcendental qualities, which appear mundane to the mundaners. I grant you all benedictions in your desire to glorify all the planets by your activities. Yes, so Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is pleased with Lord Brahma for his nice glorification of the Lord, of himself, of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Yeah, so Prabhupada makes the point that a pure devotee like Lord Brahma and those in his disciplic succession, they always want that the Lord be known just all over the universe and by every living entity, every single living entity. And therefore, they try to do it. They try to do it. Just like Kadamba Kanana Maharaj passed away recently, almost a month ago, about 4 weeks ago, or 3.5 weeks, something. And we were reading that verse by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He reasons ill who thinks that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still in sound. The Vaishnav dies to live, and while living tries to spread the holy names around. This is what Garbhadakshay Vishnu, this is what Srila Prabhupada and Garbhadakshay Vishnu are talking about here. That like Lord Brahma, he desires that the glories of the Lord be spread everywhere, all over, literally all over. And well, he's a pure devotee. So any pure devotee like Brahma and those in his line, they always want that the glories of the Lord are just spread all over, and everyone gets the opportunity to learn about the Lord, and in this way have their Krishna consciousness awakened, their dormant Krishna consciousness, and then they'll become devotees. So Prabhupada makes the point that desire is always blessed by the Lord. That desire. I mean, any sincere desire to serve the Lord is always blessed by the Lord. But particularly that desire to preach and spread his glories is always blessed by the Lord. So Prabhupada makes the interesting point that an impersonalist sometimes may pray for the Lord's mercy. Yes, but he doesn't understand the transcendental nature of the Lord. So he thinks that the Lord is a manifestation of sattva guna, of the mode of goodness. So he prays to the Lord in that sense, that my Lord, you are the manifestation of the mode of goodness. But those prayers Prabhupada says, such prayers don't satisfy the Lord because they don't glorify him in terms of his transcendental qualities. That's the thing. We can't just conceive of him as being some sort of personification or manifestation of the mode of goodness. Like some people, they pray to God, please save the hungry people. It's just material, mode of goodness. Feed the hungry and educate the uneducated. They pray like this. But those prayers do not satisfy him because they're not pointing out his transcendental nature, his transcendental quality. Prabhupada makes the point, he's merciful to everyone. The Lord is always merciful to everyone, but particularly to the pure devotees. They're always the most dear to him. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, here the word gunamayam is significant because it indicates the Lord's possessing transcendental qualities. Gunamayam, yes. Okay, so we go on to verse 40. We're getting to the end of the chapter. Anyway, we'll finish the chapter today. There's only, with this verse 40, there's only 5 verses left. Okay, so verse 40. Any human being who prays like Brahma and who thus worships me shall very soon be blessed with the fulfillment of all his desires. For I am the Lord of all benediction. Yes, so Prabhupada makes, it's all very important actually. So Prabhupada makes the point that Brahma's prayers, or prayers, as the verse says, any human being who prays like Brahma, means prays in the mood of pure devotional service, not in the mood of, give us money, give us food, not that sort of prayer. So these prayers offered by Brahma, or prayers following in the footsteps of Brahma's prayers for in pure devotional service and for pure devotional service, they can't be chanted by anyone who wants sense gratification. No. Those pure prayers, the people who want sense gratification, they cannot comprehend. Their minds just cannot reach that area of purity, of love, of the desire simply to please selflessly. So therefore, those prayers can be chanted, Prabhupada says, selected, or recited, or even written, created. Such prayers can only be manifested by a person who wants to satisfy the Lord by service. Yeah. Otherwise, those who want to satisfy themselves or materially satisfy others, they will not be accepted by the Lord, or the Lord will not be interested. He will not be pleased by them. And Prabhupada makes a wonderful point. The Lord certainly fulfills all desires in regard to transcendental devotional service, loving service. But he doesn't, actually Prabhupada says he cannot fulfill the whims of the non-devotees. Even when such casual devotees, they're not really, they're not devoted. They don't have that mood of devotion or love. Even if somehow or other they offer the Lord very articulate and very, using very nice language and beautiful similes and grammatical constructions and flowery presentation, the best of prayers, Prabhupada says, he doesn't fulfill their desires for whatever nonsense things they want. Okay, so on to verse 41. It is the opinion of expert transcendentalists that the ultimate goal of performing all traditional good works, penances, sacrifices, charities, mystic activities, trances, etc., is to invoke my satisfaction. Garbhadakshay Vishnu says, okay. So, Prabhupada makes the point that traditionally, in human society, in material human traditions, there are traditional pious activities. And Prabhupada gives examples: altruism, philanthropy. Altruism and philanthropy are they're quite closely related. I mean, they're sort of almost synonyms, really. Basically means just to help others, materially. That's all, in simple terms. And other things like nationalism, internationalism, charity, sacrifice, penance, and Prabhupada says, even meditation in trance. Of course, that's not so traditional in the Western world, but in India, meditation is so extremely well known. And even if someone is advanced in meditation and they enter into trance, so all these different types of activities, pious activities, they can only be helpful to you, the performer, when they lead to the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then they're fine, then they're really nice. But if they're just done in and of themselves, nationalism, our country is the best. We must make our country prominent. Yes, you know how much that is going on in the world today. My Lord, it's going on so much. So these things can only be fully beneficial when they lead to the satisfaction of the Lord, or in other words, when they're done as services to the Supreme Lord. And that's the perfection of that type of activity, to satisfy the Supreme Lord. So this secret, though, is only known to the devotees. It's known to the devotees, and the example is given of Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So he was a good non-violent man. He didn't want to hurt anyone, didn't want to fight with his kinsmen. But when he saw it as being something which will please the Lord, yes, then when he understood Krishna wanted that he fight, and that Krishna had arranged it, then Arjuna put aside all his feelings of compassion for others and his not being ambitious to get a kingdom. Then Arjuna put all that aside. He gave up his satisfaction and fought for the satisfaction of the Lord. And Prabhupada makes the point, that is the right decision for all intelligent people. That's the right decision. The only concern should be to satisfy the Lord. And if he's happy, then it's a success. If he's not happy, it's a waste of time. I mean, that's a fact. That's what it is. You might think that that's very, sort of a very forthright way of putting it. It's a waste of time. You might think it might be better to say that you could do better. Means that it's okay, it's nice, but you could do better by doing devotional service, by satisfying the Lord. And you haven't satisfied the Lord, but you did a good thing. But if you had satisfied the Lord, it would be better. No, if you didn't satisfy the Lord, it wasn't a good thing, it was a waste of time. Simply a waste of time. Right, so, therefore, Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, that is the standard of all sacrifice, penance, austerity, mystic trance, and all other good and pious work. Yeah. And we should understand that very carefully. You know, in the Bhagavatam later on, I think it's the 8th canto, there's a discussion about different types of irreligion. And one of them is called Upadharma. Dharma in this context meaning religion. Upa in this context meaning near to, very close to. Just like Lord Vamana, one of his names is Upendra. He's Upa Indra. He's very close to Indra. He's the brother, actually, younger brother. So he's Upa Indra. He's close to Indra. So this is now Upadharma. It's close to Dharma. All these things here, sacrifice, penance, austerity, and these pious activities like non-violence in the case of Arjuna, or in the case of Buddhism. Buddhism is a classic form of Upadharma. It's close to religion. It's related, but it's not religion. It's not religion because it doesn't satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yes. Anyway, there are 5 forms of, like, what would you say? One of them is cheating religion, but there are 5 forms of dharma which are not truly dharma in the sense of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And one of them is chala dharma, means cheating religion. And then this one we mentioned, upadharma, it's almost religion, but it's not. It's just mode of goodness. All right, so now, verse 42, I am the super soul of every individual. I am the supreme director and the dearest. People are wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me only. So, okay. So, Srila Prabhupada, it's an extensive purport. It really is. It's an extensive purport. It's almost a couple of pages, well, depending on the format, whether it's a book or whatever. It's almost a couple of pages. So in the verse, Garbhodakshay Vishnu has said that I am the dearest. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport here, first of all, he starts to explore this idea of the Lord being the dearest. Yes. And Prabhupada makes the point that the Lord is the dearest in both the conditioned and liberated state. So when someone doesn't know that the Lord is the only dearmost object, then he's in the conditioned state of life. And when one knows perfectly well that the Lord is the dearmost object, then he's considered to be liberated, or even beyond liberated, he's a devotee, because he's engaged he'll engage in service to the Lord. So then Prabhupada makes the point, and it's a subtlety, it's an important point, but it's subtle. There are degrees of knowing one's relationship with the Lord. And there are degrees depending on the degree of your realization, or on degree of realization of knowing as to why the Supreme Lord is the dearmost object of every living being. Yes, so the real reason, Prabhupada says, the real reason is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 7. Prabhupada quotes part of the Sanskrit, Mamai Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. We are parts and parcels of the Lord eternally. Eternally. We are Atma, the Lord is Param Atma. We are soul, he is Param Atma, means super soul. We're Brahman, he's Para Brahman. So we're spirit, he's the supreme spirit. And he's also Parameshwar, the supreme controller. We're also Ishwaras. We control whatever. Some people control a business, some people control a family or try to. Someone is trying to control their job, to do it properly, etc., etc., etc. So we are controllers, but he's the supreme controller. So, anyway, Prabhupada's continuing to examine this point of the Lord being the dearest, both in the conditioned and liberated states. So Prabhupada continues, the conditioned souls take the body as dearmost. The idea then, the idea of the dearmost is then spread all over the body. So it's either concentrated or extended. Concentrated on just the body, or extended means to include other people's bodies which are dear to our body. But Prabhupada goes on, as soon as the soul is out of the body, even the body of the dearest person is not attractive. Yeah. Normally either they burn it or bury it. Like the same day or the next day, at least in the Indian tradition or Krishna conscious tradition, that's as soon as the body is dead, immediately. Same day, ideally. If not, at least the next day, dispose of it. But the family members, they may have thought that body was so extremely dear to them, to embrace that body, be embraced by that body, etc. So therefore, Prabhupada makes the point, the soul is the real basis of affection and not the body. Otherwise, when the body dies, then you just want to hold on to it. I mean, it does happen sometimes. But generally speaking, the family members, the people accept, okay, just dispose of it. So therefore, the soul is the real basis of affection, not just the body. And Prabhupada makes the point, because the living entities are also parts of the whole living entity, Krishna. That supreme living entity is the factual basis of affection for all. Do you get that idea? Let me read that again. It's a sentence towards the end, not quite at the end, but close to the end of the first paragraph of this purport. Because the living entities are also parts of the whole living entity, Krishna, that supreme living entity is the factual basis of affection for all. And Prabhupada Prabhupada goes on that a person who doesn't understand, Prabhupada says, one who has forgotten the basic principle of his love for everything, has only flickering love because he's in Maya. Yes, otherwise there's only flickering love. It comes and goes. Yes. How many marriages end in divorce? It's, I don't know, but at least it depends on the country. 20-30% is pretty normal, at least in the Western world, up to 50. And just because, maybe say, just for argument's sake, 75% of the married couples did not divorce, doesn't mean that they were just really, really happy together. It just means that the dissatisfaction did not come to the point where they just couldn't tolerate being with each other any longer. And so they divorced. So Prabhupada makes, what an interesting point. The more one is affected by the principle of Maya, the more he is detached from the basic principle of love. And Prabhupada concludes the first paragraph, one cannot factually love anything unless he is fully developed in the loving service of the Lord. Because when he's engaged in the loving service of the Lord, in the devotional service of the Lord, then because of his love for the Lord, appreciation for the Lord, he or she will be able to love or appreciate others. Second paragraph, as we said, it's a big purport. So anyway, in this verse, Prabhupada says, emphasis is given to focusing our love on the Lord. And Prabhupada says the word kuriyat is significant. It means one must have it. And it's just to emphasize we must have more and more attachment to the principle of love. The principle of love, which is what we just were saying about the principle of love, that things are lovable because of their connection with the Lord, who is the basis of love. Yeah. So, but otherwise, Maya influences us, but doesn't influence the supersoul. Paramatma cannot influence. The Mayavadis, they accept the influence of Maya on the living entity, but they want to become one with the supersoul. But because they don't have any love for him at all, then they remain trapped by Maya, and they cannot approach him. They cannot even approach, Prabhupada says, the vicinity of the supersoul. And Prabhupada talks about a rich miser. He won't spend his money, he just keeps his money, doesn't know how to use his money. And therefore, in spite of being rich, you can say he's effectively a poor man. Yes, some of these rich people, to avoid being harassed by people who want donations, to avoid being harassed by the government who may want more taxes, some of these rich men, they live in small houses. And they don't use nice clothes. They don't have nice motor cars. Yeah. So effectively they're poor people. Or all they've got is like a bank statement which says they've got so much money, but otherwise they're just living like your typical everyday person or even a poor person. But otherwise, people who know how to utilize wealth, they can quickly become rich. Even if they have just a very small amount, they can quickly become rich. They can transform it by knowing how to use it. So, okay, then the third paragraph, last paragraph here. Prabhupada makes the point, the eyes and the sun are closely related because without the sun, the eyes can't see. Yeah, if there's no sun, literally no sun, and no electricity, which is just transformation of sunlight, then you're just in pitch darkness. And other parts of the body, they're also attached to the sun because it's warm. Yes, who likes freezing? So yeah, the body is attached to the sun for warmth. And in that way, the eyes, it's the connection with the sun for the eyes has nothing to do with warmth. It's simply seeing. The eyes don't really feel the warmth. So the other parts of the body, though, who get warmth from the sun, they take more advantage of the sun than the eyes. So, and Prabhupada makes an interesting point, without possessing affection for the sun, the eyes cannot bear the rays of the sun. Or in other words, such eyes have no capacity to understand the utility of the sun's rays. Yeah, without, affection for the sun. Like, if your eyes are sun sensitive, then you have to wear dark glasses. Otherwise you can't tolerate the brightness. It's too much for your eyes. Yeah, so such eyes which have something wrong with them, or Prabhupada's saying, without having affection for the sun, without having affection for the sun, they can't tolerate the rays of the sun. So similarly, the empiricists, empiric philosophers, just with their senses they're trying to understand, despite knowing about Brahman, they can't use the mercy of the Supreme Brahman because they lack affection for the Lord. So therefore, so many of the impersonalist philosophers, they just stay in Maya, even though they have knowledge of Brahman, but they can't develop affection for Brahman. Prabhupada says their method is defective, so therefore they can't develop that affection. Prabhupada says, a devotee of the sun god, even though devoid of eyesight, can see the sun god as he is even from this planet. Whereas one who is not a devotee of the sun cannot even bear the glaring sunlight. Yet within themselves they can see the sun god. So similarly, Prabhupada says, even though a person's not on the level of being a jnani, still the person can see the Lord due to love. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in all circumstances, one should try to develop love of Godhead, and that will solve all contending problems. So there's 2 verses left. Let's just read them quickly. Verse 43 doesn't have a purport. Garbhodakshaya Vishnu says, by following my instructions, you can now generate the living entities as before. In other words, Brahma's done it before. Yeah. Now he's doing it again. The creation, he created before. So you can, by following my instructions, you can now generate the living entities as before, by dint of your complete Vedic wisdom and the body you've directly received from me, the supreme cause of everything. And verse 44, the sage Maitreya said, after instructing Brahma, the creator of the universe, to expand, the primeval Lord, the personality of Godhead, in his personal form as Narayan, disappeared. So there's short purport here. Prabhupada makes the point that before creating the universe, Lord Brahma saw the Lord. That's explained in the Chatushloki Bhagavatam. In the 9th chapter of the 2nd canto, Brahma saw the Lord, but he hadn't started creating. So this means that the Lord existed in his personal form, as he is, before Brahma. So that form of the Lord was not created by Brahma, as all the other planetary systems, etc., and forms of species of different bodies were created by Brahma. The Lord, the form of the Lord, was not created by Brahma. It was already existing. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the personality of Godhead appeared as he is before Brahma, and he disappeared from him in the same form, which is not materially tinged. All right, devotees, we'll continue tomorrow with the 10th chapter of the 3rd canto. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.